錬金術は物質を理解分解再構築する科学なり、されど万能の技にはあらず、無から有を生ずることあたわず、何かを得ようと欲すれば必ず同等の対価を支払うものなり、これすなわち錬金術の基本、
fundamental basis of alchemy. Okay.
錬金術の基本であり、そは人体錬成なり、これ何人も犯すことなかれ。
兄さん、リオールの教師の噂。
Lior, okay.
奇跡の技な。何もない空間から花を錬成するってんだろ。単なる手品かもしれないが、
もしそうでなければ、
ひょっとするとひょっとするかもしれないな。
To get their bodies back, huh?
セルクセスを一夜で滅ぼした天井の石、
The Philosopher's
東の
Stone.
賢者によって封印された大エリクシル、それが賢者の石。これがあればアルの体を取り戻せるかもしれないのに。
The first day, oh boy. 10 years ago.
どこ？
Oh, is this mom?
また父さんの書斎を散らかして。
Daddy studies, huh?
見てて。それ錬金術よね。父さんに習ったの？
いない人にどうやって習うのさ。
Oh, okay.
やっちゃいけないことだった。
そんなことないわ。すごい。さすが父さんの子ね。母さんみんなに自慢しちゃおう。
母さんが褒めてくれる。
No, a father that's not around, huh?
流行り病に見舞われて。
Ah, there it is. Tragedy, right?
父さんが帰ってくれば。
あいつのことは言うな。あんなやつ父さんじゃない。
Hmm,
母さん
okay.
のお葬式にも帰ってこなかったんだぞ。
A missing father, huh? Kind of reminds me of Grisha.
お母さんを元に戻せないか
でも人間を作るのはやっちゃいけないことだって本に書いてあったよ。
な。だから二人だけの秘密な。
おっちゃんが言ってたよ。死んだ人のことを思って泣くと、その涙の分だけあの世で死んだ人も悲しむって。
Childhood
相手
friend?
なんかねえよ。お前こそお父さんとお母さんしょっちゅう出かけてるから、
Aw.
寂しくて泣いてるくせに。
Don't take it out on her, dude.
泣いてなんかないわよ。
本当かな。
飲まないとチビのまんまだよ。
あれチビじゃ済んだらずババア。
なんだってこの豆粒チビ。
Okay, so that started early.
ババア。
マイクロチビ。
あれ5歳
Micro chibi.
サイズ。
Look at this art style, though.
また学校で
Paintings
関係ない
almost.
本読んで。
ウィンリーには関係ねえよ。
ずるい。いつも二人で秘密にして。
So
じゃあね。
they're kind of like prodigies, right? They were able to figure it out just from the books.
それにしてもシチューを発明した人は偉大だ。牛乳が入ってるのにあんなにう
He's
まい。
a sweet kid,
なん
Al.
だよそれ。野菜スープに牛乳を作る。
おー
考えがすげえよ。科学者にもそういう発想の転換が必要だな。
そんなもんかな。
そうさ。人体錬成もきっとそういう発想が必要なんだよ。
Okay, okay.
人体錬成について調べ、錬金術の先生の下
Alchemy
で
master.
腕を磨いた。
Oh. Whoa, look at this. Gothic.
炭素 20kg。
This has Frankenstein, resurrection
石灰 1.5kg。
written all over it, doesn't it?
100g。あとは
Oh, man.
魂の情報だ。
The red motif, huh?
行くぞ、ある。
Yeah, the pseudo armor's back there.
兄さん、なんか変だよ。
Skull. Oh no, Al. The effects on this.
よ
誰？
おお、よくぞ聞いてくれました。俺はお前たちが世界と呼ぶ存在、あるいは宇宙、あるいは神、あるいは真理、あるいは善、あるいは一。そして俺はお前
You? Whoa.
身の程知らずのバカ野郎。
He's going in. So he's about to have some kind of experience here.
お前が欲しがってたものだろ。見せてやるよ。真理を。
Whoa, 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 whoa.
ものすごい量の情報を直接頭にぶち込まれたみたいだった。
Whoa, are there any spoilers in there?
だけど唐突に理解した。これが真理。
Those little hands though. Wow.
どうだった？
もう少し先に俺の求めているものが、
Huh.
人体錬成の真理があった。お願いだ、もう一度見せてくれ。
Yeah, that's not gonna happen, is it?
これだけの通行量だとここまでしか見せられない。
通行量。
さあ、通行
Oh, there it is.
量。10日交換だろ。錬金術師。
He's got both his arms, meaning he's gonna give one up to get Al back, or his soul at least. Oh no. This is bad business, man. There it is. They're showing the blood on his hands. The spirit.
返せよ。弟なんだ。足だろうが腕だろうが心臓だろうがくれてやる。
Arm.
だから返せよ。たった一人の弟なんだよ。
秦国の練炭術、そういうものがあるらしい。正直俺にはさっぱりだが、知ってるか？いや、初耳だ。ところで、
Let's keep that in
ル
mind.
リック兄弟はどうしてる？なんだってエドを国家錬金術師にしたんだ。
That's an interesting
まだ子供
question.
なんだぜ。軍に
Oh,
いる以上、
nice.
いつか地獄を見る羽目になる。俺たちみたいにな。
Ah, okay, so they know about this Ishbal hell as well.
地獄か。地獄なら見たさ。
Yeah, they've seen that for sure.
十分にな。君たちの家に行ったぞ。なんだあのありさまは。何を作った？
ごめんなさい。許してください。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。
まさかこんな子供が不完全とはいえ人体錬成を行い、魂の定着まで成し遂げるとは。
Yeah, he did that, but
国家錬金術師になる資質が十分ある。
he's like he's recruiting right
国家
now.
錬金術師になると有事の際は兵士として働くことになりますが、同時に様々な特権や最高レベルの研究が可能となるのです。
Enticing
こ
him
の
as
子た
well.
ちが
Huh?
元の体に戻る方法も。
あれは人間なんかじ
Yeah,
ゃな
that
か
would.
った。
Yeah,
あんな
she's
恐ろ
spot
しい
on.
ものを作るのが錬金術なのかい？私は反対だね。また地獄を見ろってのかい、この子たちに。
This is interesting by Mustang.
リザでいいわ。リザ。
Riza, there's a name.
よろ
Ooh,
しくね。
Hawkeye. Oh, she's not taking that hand.
人を撃ったことがあるの？
あるわ。
軍人さんは嫌い。父さんも母さんも戦場に連れて行かれて殺されたから。
I mentioned her parents earlier.
エドとアルも連れて行こうとしてる。
Two more people she really cares for, huh?
自分で決めること。
強制はしない。ただ私は可能性を提示する。
進むのかとどまるのか。
絶望のまま一生を終えるか、可能性を求めて軍に頭を垂れるか。
それを決めるのはあの子たち自身。
リザさんはなぜ軍人になったの？
守るべき人がいるから。
帰るぞ。
はい。
Enter Roy Mustang. Oh, there
ウ
she
ィン
is.
リーです。
そう、ウィンリーちゃん。また会えるといいわね。
Okay, this is clearly important.
来るでしょうか。
来るさ。
Whoa.
あの少年、無気力な目をしてましたけど。
そうかね。あれは火のついた目だ。
Yep, that's a different look now. Interesting approach by Roy Mustang. Let's talk about it.
ある。もう少し我慢してくれな。俺が元の体に戻してやる。
その時は兄さんの体も一緒だよ。
Look at this.
僕の魂を錬成した時以来なんだ。
Man.
いいさ。
おお、バッチリバッチリ。
No transmutation circle, right?
錬成値もなしに先生と同じことができるようになったんだね。
あ
Whoa.
るもできるだろ。
できないよ兄さん。
あれを見なかったのか。
あれって？
いや、なんでもない。可愛げのねえ機械オートだぜ。
可愛げなくて結構。機械オタ結構。私あんたが元の体に戻るまでサポートするって決めたんだから。
This is kind of like a love interest.
誰？
Pure President King Bradley.
そう、試験を始めたまえ。
He's about to shock him,
錬成
man.
心を書く道具は持っているか。
いらないよ、そんなもん。
錬成陣もなしに。
Oh, he's got his sword out.
こういう風に用心
You see it at the bottom?
あるかもしれないからさ。この試験方法を見直した方がいいんじゃない？
なかなか肝は据わっておる。だが世界の広さを知らん。
Ah, yeah, he had his sword out.
試験も頑張りたまえ。若すぎる錬金術師よ。
いつ抜いたんだよ。
Yeah.
兄さん試験大丈夫かな。
ねえ、ある？
ん？何？
エドが
beautiful.
国家錬金術師になったらこの村出て行っちゃうの。
Aw. Two more people that she really cares for.
大総統も随分とまた皮肉な目を。
Oh, the Fuhrer gave him that title, huh?
これで君も晴れて軍の犬だ。
鋼を授ける。
Full metal.
鋼？
そう、君が背負うその名は鋼の錬金術師。
いいね、その重苦しい感じ。
Full Metal Alchemist. I like that. How the name came to be. Lior. Whoa.
あの町にアルの体を元に戻す手がかりが。賢者の石。
The Philosopher's Stone. Alright, folks. So, see this episode right here? Episode 2. Now, this was the emotional hook of the series, right? Oh my goodness. I mean, you know, first of all, it packed so much into just one episode, right? And even the progression, just so much in this one episode. And I mean, there's a lot to talk about here, man. This is, you know, I'm not just speaking of key moments. I'm talking about like really, you know, stuff that really sets up the rest of the series, essentially, right? This is, you know, the spine of the series essentially is kind of established here, hasn't it? I mean, the inciting incident is certainly present in episode 2, and you know, it is quite the substantial inciting incident. They hinted at it in the first episode, right? As Isaac McDougall, the Ice Alchemist, figured out that they did, or indeed they did perform the human transmutation. And you know, they showed a quick flashback of it, a quick glimpse, and now I actually got to see it. But yeah, you know, essentially the backstory episode really shed some light on their, you know, troubled childhood, their difficult childhood, their struggles, you know, after their mom passed on, their only parent that's, you know, in their life at the moment, present, or she was present in their lives, but then she passed on because of an epidemic, because, you know, their father, daddy, you know, is certainly mentioned here, but he's not around, you know, he's not part of the picture. He's been gone for years, who knows how long at this point. He's not part of their lives, essentially. And you see that Ed has quite a bit of resentment towards his father because, you know, he hates the fact that he wasn't even able to return for the funeral, right? So, of course, you know, there's something interesting going on there, right? And, you know, I mentioned it kind of reminded me of Grisha because I do get the feeling that there is something going on here, you know. It sets it up nicely for a reintroduction at some point, or an introduction proper. to see the things he's been up to, the things that are keeping him out there, right? You know, he's certainly an alchemist, you know, an established alchemist, a respected one perhaps, an impressive one from the looks of it. So maybe he's out there, you know, maybe he was called out there. And yeah, he's just been out there. But, you know, of course, once the time is right for his introduction to the story, I'm sure it'll be quite an intriguing backstory for him as well. Now, you know, part of me kind of thinks, or part of me did think, you know, did I kind of see a glimpse of their father in episode 1? You know, that mysterious figure? You know, I don't know. Just kind of, you know, that's the only other person I've seen, you know. I mean, their father could be someone that I, you know, haven't seen yet at all, right? But, you know, I'm trying to see if maybe there is a connection there. Unless, of course, you know, that's just someone else entirely that they were kind of, you know, hinting at, kind of teasing, of course. You know, that episode still remains to be a bit of an outlier, right? Given the fact that it was meant to be more of a reintroduction for existing fans, right? Bit of a filler. But yeah, you know, in that sense, it's kind of difficult to... Should I consider this the real, true episode 1 then, right? This certainly had that feeling, right? The origin story, the backstory. Though, of course, it was cutting back and forth, right? Because they established the present timeline through episode 1. And, you know, in this episode, you see glimpses of that. You know, them on the train to Lior. So that's, you know, that's the next phase of this story, them in Lior. You know, they showed a glimpse of Lior. And they established that the brothers are trying to go to Lior. But then, you know, this Isaac McDougall situation happened. They had tickets, right? Now they get to use those tickets as they're on the train to Lior, and they arrived at the conclusion of this episode. But, you know, circling back to the brothers, you know, I've got to say, I adore them. I really do. I adore the relationship they have, the bond they have, you know, the Brotherhood, right? So adequately titled anime, for sure. Alphonse, such a sweet kid, man. It's impossible not to like this kid, this character. He's so loyal, you know, perhaps even loyal to a fault, or could be loyal to a fault. You know, it's so lovely how much he cares for his older brother, how much he looks up to his older brother, how much he looks out for his older brother, essentially his right-hand man, right? And, you know, in that sense, you see that he does give up his right arm to bring him back, or at least his soul back, right? And attach it to that suit of armor. Surely that's not a coincidence, right? Him giving up his right arm to bring back Alphonse, who essentially is his right-hand man as well, right? But yeah, it was quite difficult to see Alphonse get snatched in that, you know, human transmutation, though it felt more like a dark ritual, right? It really did have that feeling that this shouldn't be, you know, and you see Alphonse immediately realizes, okay, this is not right. You know, this is dark business. This shouldn't be. There's something off about this, and it really did have that feeling. And even the setup, right? You see that red motif 2 episodes in a row now. So yeah, I can see that happening quite a bit. Now, you know, I love the perspective of that. Really had that, you know, Frankenstein monster resurrection feel about it, didn't it? And the ravens also kind of reminded me of Odin, because, you know, that notion of sacrificing the physical body to gain wisdom is certainly present, right? You know, because Odin gave up the eye, just the one, you know, for that wisdom, didn't he? And, you know, that notion is certainly present in this story, or in this episode as well, right? It was quite a cost. It was quite a toll, as that ominous, strange yet intriguing figure, the truth, right, told young Ed. But yeah, from a visual standpoint, it's been so impressive. It really has, you know, the animation, the backgrounds, the stylized approach for certain, you know, elements or certain scenes. You know, the score is fantastic, you know. In that sense, you know, it's been quite impressive 2 episodes in. Those elements of this. I mean, it's early days, but I can see, you know, I can already kind of see the reason this is so highly rated. I certainly see the potential of it, being or going in that direction of, being one of the greatest anime of all time, for many, the greatest anime of all time. I see a glimpse of that for sure already. All the setup is there. But, before I go any further, let's get into some of the new characters, because, anytime I get into a new series, I love to get a handle on the names and, just get to know the characters immediately or as soon as possible. So there's a childhood friend who really cares for the Elric brothers, Wenri, and then her grandma, who's a fun character for sure. And she also seems to understand Ed. Then there's of course the mom. Maybe I could have used a few more scenes of the mom and the brothers, together. I just got a quick glimpse of her, in that sense. It kind of felt like Alphonse takes after his mom. She's also lovely, she's also sweet, soft-spoken in her disposition, and Alphonse is just like that, isn't he? Alphonse is super likable. So yeah, I do get the feeling he kind of took after his mom. It would have been nice to see a bit more of her. Just a quick glimpse, and then unfortunately she passed on, right, because of the epidemic. And that set a lot of things into motion. That set everything into motion, essentially. And it led Ed down quite a risky path, quite a dark path. And of course, Alphonse followed his brother, followed his lead. They set that up really early on. I mean, it's only 2 episodes in, but they set that up in episode 1 on that rooftop, right? Again, kind of a iconic shot, and I used it for my thumbnail, but I believe Alphonse said, "After you, brother," right? Or something along those lines, right? But circling back to new characters and name drops, they showed this alchemy master, their alchemy master, right? Now, Alphonse said something quite interesting. He established that their alchemy master was also able to do alchemy without the transmutation circles. So does that mean she also attempted human transmutation, right? I mean, Ed attempted human transmutation, and of course, because of this transgression, he did pay a price. There was a toll, but in return, it appears he was able to get this ability, right? Of doing alchemy and not needing any of those transmutation circles. So it appears that maybe their alchemy master did the same thing, right? Tried the same thing at some point, and she is also able to just do alchemy or perform alchemy, right? And not need any of those transmutation circles. So I hope I get to see more of her, right? Again, there's a lot of episodes. This is going to be quite a long-term series on my channel. So yeah, I'm hopeful that they are going to show a bit more of this alchemy master, this teacher, essentially, who herself might have, dabbled in something quite dark. And of course, I got a name for Roy's partner, right? Riza Hawkeye. Quite the name. And, I do think one of the standout scenes of this episode is the scene between Riza and Wenri, right? You see at first she's quite reluctant around her. She's even reluctant to take her hand because she seems to, or not seems to, she did have this disdain for soldiers, because she does kind of, pin, or she does kind of blame the death of her parents on soldiers, essentially, right? She blames them. But, after spending a bit of time with Riza and, getting to understand her motivations and, seeing that they are actually quite respectable, the motivations, that is, the desire to protect someone you care for, I think, that resonated. And you see, as she said that, Riza, that is, Roy Mustang comes in. So, of course, not so subtle, but yeah, I mean, I think it was clear. And, she can relate, given her connection or her, friendship with the Elric brothers, right? She cares for them. And, maybe even a bit of a love interest for Ed. But you know, beyond that, you know, just as friends, childhood friends, she cares for them, right? For sure. And you see that she showed concern, you know, just like her parents got taken away or had to leave. Now, you know, her childhood friends, someone she cares for, you know, people she cares for, friends she cares for, now they're being taken away or in the process of it, right? So, you know, that conversation really helped her, right? And, you know, I love that by the end of it, she's the one who, you know, extends her hand, right? She does want to take Riza's hand. So I thought it was a great scene. And, you know, let's see how that plays out. I felt that it was an important one for Winry and Riza, perhaps. And, you know, I would love to see them, you know, meet up again after a few years, right? Run into each other again after a few years. And, you know, I think even Roy Mustang's role here is quite interesting, you know, almost kind of fits in as a father figure, you know, kind of. Though, of course, you know, earlier Hughes, Maze Hughes, gotta love him. You know, he's trying to ask about, you know, the Elric brothers, how they're doing. But, you know, you see that Roy is quick to kind of shut that down. That notion that, you know, he's looking out for them, or, you know, he knows about them at all times. But, you know, you see there is an element of that here, right? Though, of course, you know, you saw in my reaction, part of me was a bit iffy at first, you know, because I did feel like there was a bit of opportunistic, you know, recruitment going on, given the situation he found them in, or he found Ed in. But, you know, I also do feel like his reaction to this was much like a father's reaction could have been, right? Of course, he came down hard on him, for sure, you know, for attempting this thing. But then you see that he does also give him some guidance. He does try to empower him to, you know, pick himself up and try to put himself and his brother together again, right? Gives him guidance on how to do that, gives him an opportunity, right? A door of hope, essentially, right? So yeah, you know, interesting element there for sure, because, you know, this is an adult that's in their life. You know, they, other than this, it's just a grandma, right? Because their mom passed. So yeah, you know, and these people, you know, Riza, Roy Mustang, Maze Hughes, right? Even Armstrong, you know, I didn't see him in this episode, but yeah, you know, these characters are the adults in their lives, right? So there is an interesting element there. But you see, for Hughes, it is more of a father figure type thing. You know, he's thinking of them as children, and, you know, he's looking out for them as children, you know. Yeah, he's a good man, you know, wholesome man. You know, these two children, you know, these two brothers, the Elric brothers, they find themselves in quite a, you know, quite a unique situation, right? Yet he's still able to look at them as children, right? He is able to separate that and see the type of burden they might have on them, or might be placed on them at that age, right? Again, you know, he speaks of Ed being the youngest state alchemist, you know, and the pressures of it. And, you know, joining the military is its own kind of hell, right? It brings you a different kind of hell. Though, of course, you know, Roy Mustang made it known, you know, they've seen hell, all right, and they saw hell, you know. I'll get into the actual, you know, human transmutation scene. It's a dark scene. It's a heartbreaking scene. It's a memorable scene for sure. You know, 2 episodes in, it's again, you know, that is going to set up. I mean, it is, you know, it has set up quite a bit for the rest of the series, right? The aftermath of that. Now let's look at the inciting incident. It's presented in this episode, right? And it's a major deal. Like I keep saying, it's a spine of the series, essentially. Everything comes out of this, right? It's connected to this. So, you know, usually an inciting incident is an event, right? Either it happens to the protagonist, or the protagonist, or the multiple protagonists, in this case, cause it. Though, of course, you know, you see that Ed takes the lead on this, and Alphonse, you know, the loyal brother he is, he follows it, right? He follows everything Ed is trying to do, right? He trusts him. So, you know, again, loyal. Now, you know, in this, like I said, in this case, the protagonist caused this, right? Now, of course, this could also be a case of setup and payoff type inciting incident, right? The setup being the death of their mother, right? And the payoff being the subsequent human transmutation to bring her back. But of course, the human transmutation scene itself is quite a chilling one, quite a memorable one for sure. You know, again, like I mentioned, that stylized shot, the red motif, and you know, the gothic presentation of that, of their house, and of course the presence of ravens, really did have that feeling of the Frankenstein resurrection, or something dark about to take place in this residence, right? And you know, even in the setup, you know, as they're preparing everything, you see that they never show their eyes, right? That the way I see it is that, you know, they're not able to see the truth, essentially. I'm pretty sure they don't show their eyes during the whole setup. Is once both of them put their hands down on the circle, right? Then they show the eyes. But, you know, in the setup of it all, no. Either, you know, it's cut off at the eye level, or, you know, it's that thing, you know, it's in darkness, or it's shaded. But yeah, you know, almost instantly something was off, right? This was not right. It didn't feel right. And Alphonse immediately clocked it. He's like, no, you know, something's off here. But yeah, you know, the scene itself, it's a haunting scene, you know, to see Alphonse get pulled in and get deconstructed, essentially, right? Essentially, his whole body was taken. That was the cost, right? His whole body and Ed's leg, right? And the other reason it really felt so haunting is because, you know, I'm not even sure if I'll ever get to see Alphonse in his human form again, right? Yes, that's, you know, that's the goal, right? That's the plot goal, at least, that, you know, they are trying to, you know, restore their bodies. But, you know, of course, I think it should be noted here that Ed is, you know, it's all about Alphonse. It's all about getting his body back. At no point is he trying to make it about himself, or, you know, trying to make it that it's an equal thing at all. You know, he doesn't care about that. You know, it's you know, an afterthought to him. His own body, you know, restoring his arm and a leg. I mean, I guess that was the cost, right? An arm and a leg. But you know, he's not even thinking of that. His goal, right? Essentially his life goal at this point in time is to restore his brother's body. Essentially, Ed kind of, you know, upset the flow of nature, right? He upset the balance. You've got to let the dead rest, right? And he tried to play God. And, you know, I keep saying he because you see that he was the one who really, who was in charge here, essentially, right? You see that Alphonse is actually taken as the toll, the cost, right? His entire body, plus Ed's own leg. And, you know, it's clear that he angered this metaphysical being that is essentially, you know, a lot of things, but also kind of also in the image of Ed himself, right? Kind of like a negative image. But, you know, it ends off by saying, yeah, you know, I'm essentially you as well. The truth, essentially. And, you know, the interesting thing here is that, you know, this metaphysical being, the truth, kind of serves as a moral lesson as well, right? Kind of like personifying the thematic narrative as well through this character, this metaphysical being, right? That tries to teach young Elric a lesson, though of course you see that young Ed is not really able to grasp that lesson. He doesn't learn it, does he? Right? He had that experience, right? He certainly had that experience, but it's not quite the desired effect, was it? For young Ed, at least, you know, he thought everything, you know, he said as much, you know, he said my formula was fine for the, you know, the human transmutation, right? So you see that unfortunately he didn't learn his lesson based on the things he was saying after having that experience, right? And I love the presentation of that scene, you know, being in front of that gate. And you know, the symbols on the gate, I'm not sure, I tried to make them out, right? And of course he wanted to go back in there, but you know, this being, the truth, told him no, I can only show you that much for the toll you've paid, and of course the toe being his leg. Now, you know, that was Ed, right? That was Ed. But, you know, how about Alphonse? I mean, his entire body was taken. Now, you know, they haven't confirmed. Now, Alphonse himself, you know, told Ed that he didn't have that experience. You know, Ed just assumed that Alphonse might have had the same experience, right? And then he also probably, you know, saw this metaphysical being, you know, almost kind of like a representation of himself in front of that gate, right? In front of his gate. But it appears that he didn't have that experience, you know? Unless, of course, he's, you know, holding things back. Has he seen even more than Ed? Maybe, right? So much more than Ed. And maybe is he holding it back? Maybe he just doesn't have any recollection of it. Or maybe he didn't have that experience at all, right? I mean, he tells Ed that he didn't, you know, he didn't see anything. And Ed, you know, just kind of decides to not mention anything. But is it possible he's holding things back from Ed? You know, things he knows about, things he'd rather not share, right? You know, not for the sake of not sharing, but for his brother's sake. You know, maybe there is something that he thinks is better not to share with his brother, right? Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but did Alphonse's soul get attached to that thing? You know, that creature, that abomination. You know, it wasn't their mother. You know, it really wasn't. But, you know, it appears that only his body was taken, right? So his soul might have been attached to that. But then Ed was able to, you know, somehow get his soul back. You know, again, he did the transmutation. He was able to get his soul and attach it to the suit of armor, right? So, yeah, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but so his soul was attached to that thing, right? That creature. Again, you know, it was a version of their mother, but, you know, that is not how they remember her. That was just, that was really creepy, you know, that was really unsettling. Kind of reminded me of Game of Thrones. Remember, spoilers, just in case. Remember in season 1, Khal Drogo is kind of, he's on his deathbed, essentially, and Dany decides to, you know, bring in the witch and let her do her thing. And, you know, she performs that ritual in the tent, and it was so unsettling, right? The noises coming out of that tent. It kind of had the same feeling here. And, of course, that in itself is quite the punishment for Alphonse, you know, to not have to have a hollow body in a physical world, right? To not have that sense of touch. Yeah, man. And, you know, of course, you know, it goes back to episode 1 of his notebook of all the things he wants to do once he gets his body back. Again, you know, that part does make me kind of sad because I'm not even sure, you know, it's still early days, but I'm not even sure if I'm ever going to see him back in his human form again. Now, a lot of times in character arcs, you know, the character works towards a perceived solution rather than the real solution, right? And, you know, there's something in this episode that is actually perfectly in line with the structure of a change arc. The thing a character needs is the truth, right? And, you know, if they miss out on the truth, they're never going to be able to grow in a positive manner. And, you know, the crazy thing is this episode literally had a character that was essentially the manifestation of truth, right? Kind of like a moral lesson. So, you know, I think that was quite fantastic how that kind of just lines up, right? With the narrative structure of a change arc as well. Though, of course, young Ed was not quite able to grasp that lesson just yet, right? But, you know, I do hope he gets to run it back at some point, right? You know, maybe once he's had all kinds of important experiences, right? Through progressive complications, you know, through crisis, you know, but if he was to come back to face the truth under totally different circumstances, right? As a changed person, as a changed individual, you know, after having that important moment of realization, you know, subsequently transforming his perspective about himself and the world around him, you know, I think that could present quite an quite an amazing scene, right, or possibility down the line, if that is possible again, if he could somehow return to face the truth. But of course, sometimes stories do tend to end on that bittersweet note, right, of interior gain and exterior loss. Or alternatively, there's also, that angle of the character coming to that important realization and embracing the thing they need, right, which in turn can empower them to go on towards getting the thing they wanted, right? Essentially harmonizing the outer and the inner goal, right? In the final stretch of a story, near the conclusion of a story. So, I know I'm getting a bit far ahead of myself, but, this is how I kind of like to approach a new story. In the early stages, I do like to look at the signs, and I do like to think of how the story could potentially end. And, this kind of comes from the potential from the characters, or the potential of the characters and the setup. And, this episode had a lot of setup. That's why I keep calling it the spine. And I feel like this moment of him facing this metaphysical being, this manifestation of the truth, this moral lesson of sorts, I think there's a lot of setup there, and I think there's a lot of potential there for a potential, rerun of that moment. Their mistake here was approaching this from a strictly materialistic standpoint, right? They utilized it as a scientific tool. Now, alchemy is kind of presented as a scientific tool, right? In this story. I mean, yes, it's got magical elements, but in the world of this story, it is presented as a scientific tool, right? Now, they did not consider, or, they rejected the philosophical implications of this. But of course, this failed attempt cost them quite a bit. There was quite a toll. But, because of this harsh setback, I think they were kind of forced to question their materialistic interpretation of this, right? And, subsequently kind of embarked on this journey now in search of the truth, right? In search of a solution. I mean, this episode certainly asked a few interesting questions, didn't it? What exactly does it mean to be a human? What's the value of a human soul, right? There is a bit of moral complexity to this anime, to this story. There is a philosophical element to this, no doubt about it. And that excites me. That certainly excites me. And, this is meant to be a shonen anime, right? Young adults. But, that doesn't stop it from having these themes, right? And, like I mentioned in my discussion for episode 1, it does have some dark themes that, it's clear it is going to explore a lot of different themes here, Ed saw firsthand the abomination that came about from this human transmutation, right? That was not his mother, that did not have his mother's soul. Yet he also saw the opposite. He saw his brother's soul attached to a suit of armor, yet that's his brother, right? There's no physical body, but that, his soul is present. His brother is present, right? He's missing his physical form, but his brother's there, right? So again, the buildup of a human body was kind of there in that abomination, right, of a resurrection. But, there was no soul, right? Their mother's soul wasn't attached to this. And, up next seems to be Lior. And, they set it up that, this could potentially introduce that spirituality element next, right? Though, of course, and I say that because, they mentioned the high priest. And, this high priest is able to kind of, perform miracles. And it kind of contradicts, the rules of alchemy, right? The fundamental basis of alchemy, right? Because apparently he's able to make something out of nothingness. And of course, you see that Ed is quite skeptical about this. I mean, Ed's train of thought here was essentially that it's either sleight of hand, right? It's a sham, it's fake, right? And, it's being passed off as miracles, or there could be the presence of this mythical, elusive philosopher's stone that they've been chasing, right? And of course, there's that flashback scene of him reading about it in a book. But as shown through his frustration, you know, there's not much information about it. But yeah, you know, this seems to be the object of desire for the Elric brothers. You know, they've been chasing it. And you see in episode 1 that, you know, the realization setting in that, oh, this could be the Philosopher's Stone in play. And in fact, it was in play. And, you know, through Isaac McDougall, and you see that clearly he was able to do some amazing things, you know, because of the Philosopher's Stone. But yeah, you know, let's see how this plays out. You know, they're headed to Lior, and it'll be interesting to see how Ed approaches this and his thoughts on any potential, you know, spiritual element to this, given his alchemy-centric philosophy, right? So yeah, let's see how that plays out. But yeah, you know, is the Philosopher's Stone going to end up being this, you know, object of desire that they chase throughout the series, and ultimately it doesn't really lead to much, or it doesn't quite have the meaning or the effect they thought it could have? But yeah, it sets it up nicely for the next episode, you know, them arriving in Lior, and, you know, they set it up in the first episode, in the conclusion of the first episode, through that female character, that, you know, Lior is quite an interesting place, right? I mean, she's meant to be there alongside Gluttony. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited about this next episode and the series as a whole. You know, I'm in. So if you enjoyed this, consider dropping a like, consider dropping some comments, give me your thoughts. If you're interested in full length for this episode, or maybe even early access to the next episode right now, consider checking out the Patreon page. Once again, it's only an option for anyone who's interested in that, right? If you are interested, check out the link in the description, in the pinned comment. Also, the links to my social media are in the link, in the pinned comment and in the description. But yeah, you know, that's about it for this one. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for your time, and I hope to see you again soon for the next one. Until then, take it easy.